Episode 1, The Candle That Burned Without Flame. I didn't come back for faith. I came back because I had nowhere else to run. The chapel Saturday at the edge of the forest like a memory no one wanted to claim. Its doors creaked open, as if they hadn't felt a human hand in years. Dust hung in the air like suspended ash. And yet, there was no silence. There was breathing, not from me, not from anything I could see, but from something inside the chapel, deep and patient. Like it had been waiting. I stepped inside. The wood groaned beneath my feet. The altar was cracked. The pews were rotten. But at the center, untouched by time, was a single candle. No wick, no wax strips, no flame. And yet, it was burning. I don't mean figuratively. I reached toward it, and the heat made me recoil. It was real, alive, but there was no fire. That night, I slept or tried toying the room behind the vestry. I left the candle alone, but I could feel it watching me through the wall. At exactly 3:07 a.m., I woke to a sound I hadn't heard since seminary. Whispers, Latin, but not the kind they teach. It wasn't a prayer, it was a plea. Uxin lumen in tenebris nostris, light a flame in our darkness. I opened the door. The chapel was the same, still empty, still dead, but the candle, it had moved. Now it's Saturday atop the altar, center stage, and around its base, the wood had begun to blacken, curling outward like it had been scorched from the inside. And then I saw them, footprints in the dust, child-sized, bare, leading up to the candle, and stopping. I followed them backward, all the way to the front pew. There, carved into the old oak, was a name I hadn't heard in 20 years. Mara, a girl I'd once failed to save. She died whispering something to me in the confessional. I never told anyone what she said, and now she was whispering again, through a candle that shouldn't exist. I dropped to my knees and prayed for the first time in years. Not for forgiveness, but for a sign that I hadn't gone mad. The candle pulsed, not flickered, pulsed, and in the breathless dark, I heard her voice. You left me burning, Father, so now I burn without flame. Episode 2, The Vision in the Dust. There's a kind of dust that doesn't settle. It hovers watching, waiting, like it remembers the footsteps that disturbed it, like it wants them back. The next morning, I awoke with ash on my chest. No fire, no smoke, just a perfect black smudge over my heart, as if someone had pressed their palm there while I slept. And when I opened my shirt to look closer, I saw 5 faint streaks, fingers. I ran back into the chapel. The candle hadn't moved this time, but the altar beneath it had changed. Someone or something had drawn a circle of soot around its base, with symbols I'd only ever seen in forbidden texts, marks used in old rituals, the kind that were meant to summon memory, not spirits. I brushed the dust aside with shaking hands, and then it happened. The moment my fingers touched the altar, the entire chapel changed. The wood beneath my knees softened into soil. The stained glass darkened like bruised skin, and at the far end of the room, near the confessional, a child appeared. She wasn't real, couldn't be, but I saw her just the same. A little girl in a faded dress, kneeling head bowed, hands together, lips moving, whispering something to someone who wasn't there. I couldn't hear her until the candle flared still flameless, but glowing from within, and then her voice pierced the air like glass cracking in slow motion. Forgive me, Father, for seeing what I should not have seen. I tried to move, couldn't. My body was flouncing, but my mind was being dragged backward. Images flooded in, an old confessional, a little girl sobbing behind the screen, and me, much younger, afraid to listen, too proud to believe. There was a man, she had told me, but he wore a cross, not horns, and I could forgive me. Told her to pray harder, to be silent, to forget. She never came back after that, and now she had. The chapel returned in a blink. The girl vanished, but on the floor, in the dust I had disturbed, one sentence had been written in perfect script. Truth burns, even without flame. I staggered back, heart pounding. The candle Saturday, still quiet, smug in its silence, as if it knew this was only the first vision, and many more were buried in the dust. Episode 3, The Window That Bled. I used to love stained glass, the way it held the morning light like a holy secret, how it turned God into color. But that morning, When the sun rose through the eastern window of the chapel, the glass didn't shimmer. It bled. It began with a drip, then another, and a slow, steady trail from the feet of Saint Sebastian, the martyr, nailed to the tree down to the sill. Thick, red, wet. I stepped closer and saw the impossible. The blood wasn't on the glass. It was inside it, running between the colors, sliding behind the saint's hollow eyes, as though the window was weeping from the inside out. I reached up, and the moment my finger touched the edge of the glass, my mind all gain was ripped away. That chapel flickered, the walls grew dark and long, and outside, the sky was on fire. I was no longer alone. On the floor, beneath the bleeding window, lay a woman in white, barefoot, mouth agape, as vacant. Blood pooled beneath her, but her hands were clasped in prayer. Standing above her was me, younger, eyes cold, hands clean, and walking away. I tried to scream at the vision of myself, "Help her, don't leave," but my voice had no weight in this memory. Then came the candle's hum, a low, steady pulse behind my ribs, and the woman turned her head just slightly to look right at me, not the younger me, watching, remembering. "You saw me, Father," she whispered, "and still you turned the light away." I guessed awake. The chapel had returned, the sun had risen, and the blood was gone. All that remained was the glass, now cracked, a thin fracture slicing Saint Sebastian's face in two. Below it, on the sill, someone or something had left behind a line of fresh red wax, still warm. I turned to the candle. It had not moved, but now, for the first time, there was a faint glow inside it, like an ember trying to remember it was once a flame. And I realized this candle wasn't revealing hauntings. It was replaying sins, not theirs, mine. Episode 4, The Silent Choir. It began at 12 a.m. No thunder, no wind, just harmony, soft, distant, and wrong. I awoke to the sound of voices not screaming, not whispering, singing, a hymn I didn't recognize, ancient, dissonant, beautiful in a way that felt painful. I stepped into the chapel barefoot, heart thudding, cold floor biting at my soles. The air was still, the candle sunlight, but the song, it kept going, and it was coming from everywhere. No mouths, no source, just sound woven into the walls, humming through the floorboards. I stood at the altar and listened. Qui non cantavit, non est auditus. He who did not sing was never heard. That's when I saw them, figures in the pews, barely visible like smoke caught in candlelight. Down scenes of them, hands folded, heads bowed, mouths moving, but no breath, no eyes, no sound leaving their lips. The choir was here, but it was silent. I stepped closer to the first pew. There sat a woman, translucent, almost erased. Her face looked familiar, and then I realized why. She was the first soul I ever buried. Her name was Clara. She had died in her sleep, and I gave the homily, said the right words, but I never meant them. I hadn't believed back then. I only wanted the robe, the title, not the weight. She turned her head toward me now, mouth still moving in rhythm with the others, still singing the song I couldn't fully hear. "You praised me in public," her voice whispered inside my skull, "but in your heart, I was just another coffin." Suddenly, the song stopped. That chapel fell silent. Every head turned toward the altar, toward the candle, which now glowed red hot, its wax running upward instead of down. I stumbled back. The silence rang louder than the song. Then the organ, at the far end of the chapel, played a single note, but no one touched it. A page fluttered from the choir book that hadn't been opened in years. It landed face up near my feet. One lyric, handwritten in blood-colored ink, "Let those who sang falsely be sung about in flame." The air shifted, the figures dissolved, the candle dimmed again, its ember tucked away, but the silence it left behind, it wasn't empty, it was expectant, and I knew then every unspoken lie I had told from that pulpit was waiting to be sung back at me. Episode 5, The Woman in the Wall. Some stains don't fade, they hide, until the wall begins to remember. It was early morning, the sky a dull, gray hush. I hadn't slept. The candle still burned cold and bright at the altar like a heartbeat with no body, but something felt different in the air that day. Thicker, watching. I was sweeping the chapel floor when I saw it. A face, half formed, half sunken, etched in the plaster between the third and fourth arch. The outline of a woman's cheek, her lips parted in silence, her closed eyes serene and tragic. I touched the wall. It pulsed beneath my fingers. Warm. This hadn't been there yesterday. I backed away, and in that moment, the candle flared. Not fire still flameless, but a surge of light from within, enough to cast a shadow against the wall beside the face. A figure, kneeling, mine. Then the air turned cold. Not natural cold, memory cold. I blinked, and the chapel was gone. I stood in a room lit by flickering candles, the walls unfinished, and in front of me, chained to a wooden beam, was the woman in the wall. Her eyes were open now, eyes that had once looked at me not with fear, but trust. Her voice, Atri, broke and spoke. You left me here, Father. You told me the church would protect me. I staggered back. You don't remember this, but I did. Not clearly, not fully, but something came back. She was the one who came to me late one night, told me she was being hunted by a man who claimed to be God's voice, told me she had seen things behind the altar, told me the candle had whispered her name, and I told her to stay, to pray, to trust. She vanished the next day. Everyone said she ran, but part of me always feared otherwise. I screamed, she said, but the walls kept my confession, and now they've remembered. I gasped awake, sprawled on the chapel floor, but the wall, the face was still there, now fully formed, eyes open, mouth agape, as if forever mid-scream, and beneath it, carved into the plaster with something sharp, were 7 words. My soul never left this holy place. The candle flickered. Behind the altar, I heard scratching, like fingernails inside stone, and I realized with cold certainty, she wasn't a ghost. She was a prayer never heard, and the chapel had buried her in its silence. Episode 6, The Confession That Came Too Late. The confessional booth had been silent for years. Its curtain yellowed, its cushion flattened by ghosts. But that night, I found it open. Not ajar, not forgotten, open deliberately, inviting. Inside, the air was thick, not dusty, heavy, as if every unspoken truth still hung there, unfinished. I Saturday in the priest's seat, out of instinct, out of guilt, and for a while, there was nothing. Then, the candle pulsed, the chapel dimmed, and the other side of the screen where the center is meant to kneel grew darker than night should allow. A voice came through, male, old, shaking, not from fear, but from shame. Bless me, Father, for I am already damned. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The words clung to my throat like ash. It was 20 years ago. The voice continued. I stood at this very altar, and I saw the child. My stomach turned. She came to light a candle, but what she lit wasn't fire. The voice cracked. I recognize it now. It was mine. Younger, cowardly, silent. I was hearing the confession I never gave. The memory flooded in. A little girl barefoot, trembling, eyes wide. She had run to me in the rain, begged me not to send her home. There's something in the dark, she said, behind the altar. It calls me by name, and I, God help me, told her she was tired, that children imagine things, that sometimes God tests us with shadows. The next morning, she was gone. Only her rosary was found. Beneath the pew, in the booth, I leaned forward, my breath fogging the screen. Why are you showing me this now? I whispered, and the voice replied, softly, almost kindly, because the chapel is ready to forgive, but you are not. The door beside me creaked, low, purposeful. I turned, and Mara was there, but not as a child, not as a ghost, as a silence-given form. Her lips never moved, but her eyes said everything. She knelt beside the candle, placed her small hand over the unlit flame, and it glowed red, a single spark, flickering, remembering. Then she vanished. I Saturday alone in the booth for hours. No words left, no penance enough. And on the wall of the confessional, written in fresh wax, was the sentence I had denied her. Some confessions must be witnessed, not answered. The candle no longer pulsed. It burned steady now, as if a truth had been spoken. But I knew mine was still to come. Episode 7, The Light That Burned the Bible. There are pages you don't hear, not because you fear what's written on them, but because you fear what's underneath. The chapel was colder than usual, not from the wind outside, but from something beneath the altar. breathing through the wood. I hadn't touched the Bible in days. The old one, first Bible placed on this altar when the chapel was built. Bound in leather, heavy with age, soaked in prayers no one remembered. That morning, it had moved. I found it open, face down, scorched. The edges of its pages were black and curled, as though kissed by flame, but there was no fire, no ash, just heat still radiating from within it, and in the center of the altar, like a judgment passed without trial, the candle glowed with deep crimson light. No flame, just presence. I reached for the Bible, and as my fingers touched its spine, a pulse shot through the wood beneath me, a heartbeat, thudding once, loud enough to echo through my bones. Then the pages turned, on their own, not by wind, by will. They stopped on a verse I had never seen. No translation, no cross-reference. The ink was darker than the rest, as if it had been written in something more permanent than ink. The verse read, "And the light that remembered before light was made shall return to burn the false word, not in wrath, but in remembrance." And below it, scrawled in shaky Latin, "This gospel is not for the saved." The candle pulsed once, and the Bible ignited. A flame burst from the center of the book, but it didn't consume. It peeled. The printed words lifted off the page like dead skin, floating into the air and vanishing. What remained underneath was not scripture. It was a confession, handwritten, slanted, desperate, a priest's letter to someone unnamed. I buried her beneath this altar, not because I feared her, but because I feared what she remembered, and the candle was her curse. The fire vanished as quickly as it came, and the chapel, for the first time in weeks, was silent, truly silent. I lifted the Bible. It was weightless, empty, every printed word gone. Only the confession remained. The candle flickered in approval, and I understood. This wasn't about haunted memories. It wasn't even about Mara. It was about a gospel the church refused to write, and the candle was now lighting its first chapter, Episode 8, The Miracle That Shouldn't Have Happened. They say miracles are rare, but no one tells you that some are mistakes. He appeared just after dusk, a boy barefoot, wide-eyed, maybe 8 years old, standing at the chapel door, smiling. I didn't hear him approach, didn't hear the door open. He was just there, as if the chapel had remembered him before I did. I touched the candle. He said, "And now I'm better." My breath caught. His voice was soft, innocent, but behind it, something echoed, a second voice, faint, deeper, like an old recording layered beneath his words. "Better from what?" I asked, but he didn't answer. He only walked down the aisle, straight to the altar, and the candle glowed brighter as he approached. He laid his hand on the edge of the altar and looked up at me. "She told me you'd be afraid." "Oh," I whispered. The girl in the wall. My skin went cold. He turned to the candle, still smiling. "She said it's your turn now." Later, I found out the truth. I went into the town archives, old obituaries, school records, church bulletins. It took hours. And then I found him. Matthew Elridge died 16 years ago, age 8, buried in our very cemetery. He had drowned on a church trip. His body never recovered. There was even a picture. Same face, same eyes, same boy. But no one else remembered. No one in town had spoken his name in over a decade, as if memory had been scraped clean. That night, I returned to the chapel. The candle was flickering, now erratic, like it was trying to stay lit against some invisible wind. On the altar lay a folded piece of paper. No handwriting, no ink, just a burn mark, shaped like a handprint. And beneath it, impressed letters burned into the wood. "Miracles are not always blessings. Some are evidence." I turned to the pews empty, but for a split second, in the third row, I saw him. Matthew, smiling, mouth moving, but this time, no sound came out. Only the candle responded, flaring silently, casting shadows across the chapel walls. And in those shadows, I saw down scenes of figures, not demons, not saints, something between, watching, waiting, and I knew the candle was never meant to grant miracles. It was meant to undo the ones God never claimed. Episode 9, The Priest Who Never Died. The chapel keeps secrets, but some of them walk the halls at night. It started with a scent, old, incense faint, bitter, the kind we haven't used since the 60s, the kind used for last rites. I followed the trail through the back corridor behind the pulpit, down into the cellar where the walls still breathed with mold and time. Cobwebs hung like veils. The air was colder than bone, and Theory half buried beneath a collapsed section of brick he found it. A priest's cassock, charred, shredded, the collar still attached, and inside the collar, a name tag, Father Silas Hale. But that's impossible. That's my name. I fell to my knees. Lungs tight. The stitching was clear, the years sewn beneath it. 1937. I was born in 1975. Unless, no, this had to be something else. Some cruel joke, some mistake in the records. But the candle disagreed. It lit itself the moment I touched the collar. Flameless, fierce, and the cellar trembled. I was no longer underground. I stood in the chapel, but it was no longer ruined. The pews were full, the air thick with smoke. Voices sang a hymn I never heard, low, mournful, beautiful. And there, standing at the altar, was me, older, thinner, pale, eyes like scorched glass. He looked at the crowd and spoke. Let us confess not what we've done, but what we've hidden. One by one, the congregation stood, each face twisted, flesh peeling away, not in pain, but in revelation. They weren't people, they were confessions, given form, and I the other me watched as they approached. One placed a hand on his chest, another whispered in his ear, each one leaving a mark. Then the figure at the altar collapsed, the candle on the altar lit, the chapel caught fire without flame, and the vision vanished. I woke in the cellar, alone, shaking. The cassock was gone, but carved into the stone floor, still warm, were the words, "A priest's name is never justice. You are the echo of the one who failed." I climbed out in silence, and when I entered the chapel again, the candle was burning brighter than ever. No flame, just a memory that refused to die. Episode 10, The Candle That Heard Prayers. There's a reason we bow our heads when we pray. It's not reverence, it's fear, because if you look up, you might realize something is listening that shouldn't be. It began quietly. Visitors started arriving. Not many, not locals, strangers from neighboring towns, from cities I've never visited. Each one said the same thing. I dreamed of this place, and the candle. I don't know why I'm here. Some knelt, some wept, some refused to step past the threshold, but all of them everyone stared at the candle like it was a mirror showing something they couldn't look away from. One man, a retired surgeon, came every day at dawn, never spoke, just Saturday in the front pew with tears in his eyes. I asked him once what he was praying for. "I'm not," he whispered. "I'm praying to it." Then came her, a woman in her 30s, beautiful. In that way pain sometimes makes people look eternal. She walked straight up to the altar and placed both hands on the table. The candle pulsed, and she smiled like she'd found someone she hadn't seen in years. "I told it everything," she said. I nodded, unsure what to say, but then she added, "And it answered me." That night, she vanished. No car, no luggage, just gone, like she'd been erased between heartbeats. I found a letter tucked into the hymnal where she'd Saturday. No signature, no address, just 7 words, written in blood-red ink. God stopped listening, so something else did. And the next morning, the chapel changed. The floor beneath the altar had cracked, not from age, but from weight, as if something had knelt there during the night. Something massive, something hungry. The candle glowed steady, no flame, but I could feel it, humming like it had fed on the prayers poured into it. And now it remembered everything. I knelt before it, not to pray, to ask, "What are you?" And for the first time, I heard a voice, not in my ears, in the walls, in the bones of the building. It whispered, "I am every word." God refused to answer, and I knew this was no relic, no artifact. It was a listener, a vessel for the prayers that fell through heaven's cracks and landed somewhere far, far darker. Episode 11. The fire that spoke his name. I had never seen it flicker like that. The candle, for weeks it had glowed, steady, silent, smoldering, cold but alive. But now, it was shaking, as if some pressure inside it had reached its limit. The chapel was empty, but not still. The air pulsed, vibrating with a low, rhythmic hum, like a voice warming up, waiting for the right moment to speak. And then, at exactly midnight, the candle flared. A flash. No fire, just raw, white heat, invisible but undeniable. The wood beneath the altar hissed, the windows darkened, and from the candle came a sound I will never forget. My name, Silas. Not in a whisper, not in rage, in recognition, like it had finally learned the name of the man who'd been feeding it all along. I staggered back. My lungs ceased. The word had weight. My name echoed not in the air, but in the walls, the floor, the stone foundation of the chapel. Then it said it again, Silas. I dropped to my knees. Tears came without permission. My ears rang with a memory I hadn't let surface in years. I was 12, hidden in the back pew of this very chapel. I had just watched a man die, a man who had begged to speak to a priest one last time. And, afraid, ashamed, too young to understand, did nothing. No one ever found his body, only the rosary he dropped. The next morning, the chapel was closed for renovations. They said it was structural. I knew better. Even then, I knew. I had tried to confess, and the chapel kept it. The candle pulsed again, and this time, it spoke not in sound, but in flame. For the first time, a tongue of fire erupted, just one. It licked upward, and within it, I saw a face. His, the man I'd abandoned. His eyes locked onto mine, not with hate, but with sorrow. His mouth opened, and the fire formed words. I waited for you, and now, something else has answered. The flame went out. Smoke filled the air, thick and metallic. I crawled toward the candle. The altar was scorched in a perfect circle, and inside it, a new phrase had been branded into the wood. Confession denied is judgment delayed. I Saturday in the silence, and I knew the candle was no longer just remembering prayers. It was claiming deaths, and mine was coming due. Episode 12, The Gatekeeper's Memory. Some doors don't open with keys. They open when memory decides you're ready to remember. It began with a knock, not on the chapel door, on the floor. 3 soft thuds beneath the altar, then silence, and then, again, rhythmic, insistent, like something beneath the chapel was trying to come back up. I moved the altar aside. The candle stayed perfectly still, yet somehow, watching, and underneath, buried beneath dust and old stone, was a trapdoor I never noticed, or perhaps it had never noticed me. I opened it. Darkest greeted meant just absence of light, but a living, breathing void. I descended with only the candle's glow above to keep me tethered. The steps led to a chamber carved in rough stone. No icons, no pews, just a single statue. It stood 10 feet tall, wings outstretched, not of an angel, triumphant, but of a figure collapsing. One went whole, the other shattered, a blade impaled through its side, mouth open in an eternal scream. At its feet, etched in Latin, Portum tenue, non voluntate, per penitentia. I held the gate, not by will, by penance. The gatekeeper. I stepped closer, and the stone around me began to whisper, not in words, in memories. A child's voice, trembling. Father, why does God let us hurt? A woman sobbing in the confessional. He told me to be silent, and heaven would forgive. My own voice saying, proud, trembling, I promise, Lord, I'll carry their sins for you. Each memory slammed into me like waves. They weren't all mine. They were the gatekeepers. This was the chamber where sins were stored too heavy for heaven, where memories were locked away so God wouldn't have to carry them. And the candle was never a light. It was a lock, a seal that burned quietly, waiting to be broken. The statue began to bleed. From the wound in his side, thick black ichor dripped onto the stone. I reached out without thinking, and the moment I touched the blood, I was inside him. I saw what he saw, felt what he felt. The day the first lie was whispered in heaven, the moment a truth too holy to exist was hidden. The first gate was sealed not to keep hell out, but to keep a voice from rising again. Oh, Yana's voice, the one that called out from beneath the altar, the one the candle remembers, the one heaven regrets silencing. I fell back, gasping, soaked in stone sweat. The statue's eyes glowed once, dimly, and the words on the base shifted before my eyes. The final gate is remembering, and it is opening through you. I climbed out of the chamber. The trapdoor slammed shut behind me, and the candle, It now had a flame, small, boo, impossible, but burning quietly, defiantly, and I knew the last memory had been unlocked. And what waited behind it was not mercy. Episode 13. The chapel that wasn't on earth. The candle finally had a flame, and nothing felt holy anymore. I watched it for hours, this small blue tongue of fire, flickering without heat, swaying without wind, not warm, not alive, just present, like it wasn't consuming wax, but time. That night, I closed the chapel doors, locked every bolt. I needed answers alone. I sat in the center pew, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the candle. "Show me," I whispered, and it did. The flame stretched upward, not high, but deep, like it was reaching through the ceiling into something far beyond stars or scripture. And then the world around me shifted. The pews unraveled, the walls melted like wax, and suddenly, I was no longer in my chapel. I stood in a structure that looked almost identical. Same layout, same altar, but cleaner, brighter, impossibly tall, and not on earth. The stained glass glowed with colors I'd never seen before. The air vibrated with something between music and thunder. And at the center of it all, where the candle would have Saturday, there was a throne made of silence. Empty, but still, listening. Figures moved along the edges of the chapel. Not angels, not saints, not anything I could name. They shimmered with sorrow. They walked without sound. Their faces were blank until they looked at me. And in that moment, each one wore my face, not just my features, my guilt, every version of me that stayed silent when I should have spoken. Every moment I turned away from suffering and called it faith. And then the throne spoke, not with voice, but with pressure, like collapsing inward. "You were not the first to kneel here, Silas. You were only the first to stay." The vision shifted. I saw the same chapel centuries earlier, a woman standing at the altar, hands bound, mouth open, as furious. "Aliena, they burned my words," she said, "so now they burn in you." She placed her hand on the altar, and it cracked not from weight, but from truth. The floor beneath her glowed with scripture that had never been written, verses without language, memories in the shape of flame, and above her, a gate opened, not to hell, not to heaven, to something older. I gasped, falling backward into the real chapel. A vision gone, the candle dim again, but the air around it, different, as if the room remembered what it had once been. On the wall behind the altar, new words had appeared in soot. "This is not a church. It is the echo of one that dared remember." And I finally understood. That chapel wasn't haunted. It was a copy, a reflection of a divine space erased from scripture, but not from memory. And I was never meant to serve here. I was meant to wake it. Episode 14. The last light before judgment. There are lights we chase, and there are lights that chase us. The flame was smaller now, not gloomy, but quieter, like it had told me everything it needed to. And now, it was waiting for me. That night, the chapel was silent, but not still. The air carried tension like a held breath. No more visions, no more voices, just the sense that something was about to arrive or awaken. I stood before the candle with one question in my heart, not spoken aloud, because I already knew the answer. Was it ever about forgiveness? The flame flared once, then died completely. For the first time, the candle was cold, and the chapel changed. Not slowly, suddenly, a sound like waves floating inside stone. The pews pewed back, the stained glass cracked in reverse, and overhead where the ceiling once arched, a great eye opened, not literal, not flesh, but a presence so immense it made gravity weep. And I saw them, the others, not souls, not ghosts, but confessions made flesh. Each figure wore the face of someone I felt. The girl in the wall, the boy who touched the candle, the woman who said it answered her. And at the center of them all, standing where the altar once stood, Aliena, clothed in light that did not shine, eyes closed, hands outstretched. She opened her mouth, but spoke nothing, because she didn't need to. The flame appeared between her palms. No wick, no wax, just light, just memory. She held it out to me. "Take it," the chapel whispered, "not to burn, but to be seen." I stepped forward, trembling, and as I reached for the final light, I saw myself live for the first time. Not the priest, not the believer, but the witness, the keeper of a church that never should have existed, a chapel built on buried truths and lit by the fire of refused forgiveness. I touched the light, and the judgment did not fall. It opened. A great veil lifted inside me, around me, through me, and I heard all the prayers that were never answered. They did not cry. They did not scream. They sang a single note, low, steady, final, and then, from all Yana's lips, "You were never meant to absolve, only to remember." And remembering is the beginning of judgment. When I opened my eyes, I was kneeling before the candle, flameless again, but glowing from within and above me, carved into the ceiling where no hand had ever reached. The final prayer must be said in silence. Episode 15, The Candle That Chose Its Witness. I thought I had been chosen to serve, but I was wrong. I was chosen to remember. The candle Saturday before me, flame gone, wax untouched, but it no longer felt like an object. It felt like a decision. I lit no match, spoke no words, yet the chapel began to move, not with wind, not with sound, with intention. Every pew turned inward, every shadow stretched forward, and the walls began to breathe, slow and steady, as if the building itself had lungs that had waited centuries to exhale. Above me, the ceiling cracked open again, but this time, there was no eye, no judgment, just light pure, silver, and soft like the memory of someone you once loved but dared not name. And she returned, Aliena, not a ghost, not a prophet, just a woman who had never stopped, holding the weight hadn't dropped. She knelt beside me, her face calm, hands resting on the altar. "You've seen it all," she said, "now tell it." I looked around. The chapel was full now, not with people, but with every truth we buried, every prayer we silenced, every miracle we erased because it didn't follow the rules. They Saturday like parishioners, patient, watching, waiting, and the candle pulsed once more. Its light no longer flame, but echo, a memory so loud it became a glow. I stood, not as a priest, not even as a man, as a witness, and I spoke. This chapel remembers what heaven tried to forget. It holds the voices that prayed until their throats bled. It carries the sins we refused to name and the forgiveness we never dared to offer. The candle was never meant to light the righteous path. It was meant to illuminate the wrong one, so we could turn around. The walls wept, not with water, with wax, white, gold, red, running down like melted time. Aliena stood beside me and placed her hand over the candle one last time. "You are not its master," she whispered. "You are its story." And the moment her fingers left the wax, the candle cracked. Not violently, gently, like it had fulfilled its purpose. The light within rose into the air, slow and silent, and took the form of a flame. With wings, it hovered above the altar, then vanished into the ceiling. And for the first time, the chapel was still. Truly still. I never reopened the doors. I never told anyone what happened, because you don't explain revelation. You carry it, and each night, when I walk past the chapel, I see a faint glow from within. No flame, no candle, just a presence, watching, waiting for the next witness, because the candle never needed fire. It only ever needed someone willing to see.